it just based off of looking.
Looking, yeah. So look at those area under the curves. And I made a point saying, it's not that much big difference between the epochs of those. Is there a big difference though? There is a huge difference.
Well, you're right, but if you actually calculated it,
If you actually calculate it. I mean, it's the same data.
yeah.
This
I
is
thought
here.
it said you-
But you are a guy, you're a trickster. No, you're like, it's not that big a difference. Hey, look at the graphs. You're a guy that's going to give me some kind of graph here that doesn't accurately reflect what's going on. And so sometimes this will happen. People will change the axes of the graphs. In this case, they did it and it looks like they're close to the same. Well, they're not. They're not even close to the same with regards to deficit or epoch. Now, conversely, what you might do is if there isn't a big change between something, and this happens all the time, is you'll have a graph like this, whereas if you had something that was from 0 to 10, I think I'm off the black screen here. Let me redo this. You have something like this. That's a perfect straight line, by the way. 0 to 10, and I have 2 points, 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 right around 5. And I have a line here. It doesn't really look like that's a big difference, does it, on this graph? What happens now if I change this graph? This is a Noah graph here. Look at the huge difference now between these two. Okay? Huge. One's at the top of the graph, one's at the bottom of the graph. But the scale is so small that you're only talking about maybe, whatever this is, let's say it's mLs per kg per minute. We're talking a difference between what? 0.5. Is that physiologically relevant? Maybe not. Maybe you did your stats on it though and it was highly significant because there was a difference between them. But is it physiologically relevant? I don't know. So that's some things you have to take into account when you're looking at these figures. Am I trying to make something? Like if I were to report it the previous way, where it's all condensed and go, there really wasn't any difference, maybe I don't get the manuscript published. Maybe if I do it this way and go, this is a huge difference now. Huge difference. Look at the graph. Maybe I get it published. So you're reviewing this manuscript and you're going, dude, this isn't a huge difference here. What's going on? Who are you trying to pull the wool over your eyes? Carmen, what are you trying to pull here? That's what I'm saying. Okay? So that's why you got to look at these at the that was awesome. The difference here is because it was a huge difference. Okay? If I told you it was this, you guys may have said, maybe heavy exhaustive exercise is only a little bigger than the epoch, as you explained it. But when you standardize it to the same axes, you get this. Okay? Same data, just represented a little different. And I think this is a better way to do it. So be aware. And this is the textbook right here. This is what the textbook says, not your textbook, the $200 one that I didn't have you buy. It shows it this way in the textbook. It's a little misleading. So that's why we regraphed it to look at what was going on. Okay? So a little picture here of exactly what we talked about. If you're a visual learner, we got which ones are the rapid component. We'll start over here. Elevated hormones, rapid or slow? Slow. When we're talking about those hormones, what are they? Catecholamines, exactly. Okay. Post-exercise elevation of heart rate and breathing, rapid or slow?
Rapid. No, slow.
Slow. Elevated body temperature, slow. Restoration of muscle and blood oxygen stores,
That's rapid.
rapid. Conversion of lactate to glucose. This one should be by what? Rapid. Process of elimination. Okay? Same thing on the previous slide, just a visual one. But you have to realize that it's listing in a different order, so keep track of your rapids and slow on this slide. Okay? Questions about epoch? Not sure why I put the electron transfer. Okay? This is from a different figure, or a different textbook. I like this one too because it's a little better representation of what's going on with regards to epoch as well. And so here you have different intensities with regards to A, B, and C. But again, you basically see the same things with regards to the amount of epoch changes for the type of exercise that you have. If you're doing a low steady state exercise, your O2 deficit's relatively small, and then you can maintain that VO2 at steady state exercise, the epoch is relatively small. And then if you're doing a little higher exercise, you can see we can still maintain that. The O2 deficit is the same as what we're able to maintain, but the epoch is a little higher with a higher intensity. And then panel C reflects what we saw with really high intensity exercise. Okay? Yeah, awesome.
Epoch change depending on how long the duration of the exercise.
Say that again.
Let's say you reach steady state, you do that for an hour versus the 2 minutes that's probably up there. Does epoch curve change?
Yes, what do you think? So what you're saying is if we were to, let me make sure I'm getting your question right, is what if we had, let me go back to this one. So you're saying is if we had a graph like this, if you went out like this, correct? Long time, then what would happen to epoch?
You're going to have a short, rapid, and then you're going to have a really long, slow flush.
So it's going to depend on the type of the intensity of the exercise. If it's something that you can maintain for a long period of time, it may change your epoch a little bit, but think about this. If we go back to this figure right here, okay? If it's this one, this top one right here, and you're able to extend that out a lot, and so you're able to maintain that exercise, is there anything happening in there that would change epoch? So think of the 6 things that epoch does. So the first one is we store PC stores, and then what do?
Give blood and muscle
Restore
oxygen,
O2 blood stores for O2 deficit, and then it's heart rate, breathing, body temperature, and then catecholamines and lactate, right? So if we did this one, would any of those change significantly? Body temperature could be a little higher, right, if you're exercising for a long period of time. So then your epoch may be higher based upon that. Okay? How about heart rate and breathing? Would it be higher? If you exercised for, let's say this is 6 minutes, or you exercised for 2 hours, does your heart rate, breathing come down when you exercise? Let's say an hour.
Imagine if you're in the anaerobic metabolism, would be the same roughly.
Probably a little the same, maybe take a little longer just because you've been doing it for a long period of time. So, and then now if you go to this panel here is, now that you're doing a higher intensity exercise, look at that epoch. So it's higher because we're doing higher intensity exercise. So some of the O2 deficit is going to be higher, and we're probably going to be working at a higher heart rate, breathing frequency, temperature may be increased. So now if we extended that out, would we get a little bigger epoch based upon that? Probably, yeah, but significantly, probably not. Okay? Probably not much difference because you have to think about what's going on physiologically with regards to those things that are happening in epoch, and it's going to depend on. This exercise will depend on if you're just above what you can meet aerobically. Like if this one specifically, if we started to this, if we continued it out, would we have to start anaerobically supplying it, and then do we produce lactate, and that's going to increase our epoch because we want to convert it back to glucose. So it's going to definitely depend on the intensity of the workload, and then what's happening aerobically to meet the demands of that. And if you can't meet it aerobically, you're going to have to anaerobically do it.
So it's also decrease your, because it's approximately 20%, that takes care of the deficit in the first place.
So your deficit, you probably would repay that back, that's the same, because that O2 deficit would be the same, but as you start to creep up and go longer and longer, you may not be, let's say, you're right at 70% of max, and you start to take that out longer. There may be a point where you are now required to, you can't meet your, the demands aerobically, so you may have to have some aerobic metabolism come in there. That's gonna affect things in your EPOC, specifically lactate, okay? And maybe some catecholamine, so your EPOC will be a little higher if you start adding anaerobic things in, okay? So it's a complicated question. It depends on what the exercise intensity is, and then metabolically what you were doing to meet that exercise intensity over that period of time. Does that make sense? Good question. Let's see where we are here. So this is a little different way to let's go on here. To look at it. So here we're actually looking at the area under the curve. And so this could be something with regards to what Austin was talking about. So here we're doing a EPOC, doing a 3-hour recovery from treadmill walking at different time lengths. Okay, so exercise for 20 minutes, exercise for 40 minutes, exercise for 60 minutes, and you can see there is an increase in that EPOC depending upon what's going on in that 3-hour recovery time. Now, hopefully we don't know what this workload is. We don't know if it's something that is a low workload that you could maintain for a long period of time, or is it a workload, again, based upon we're seeing a little bit of a difference here, that it's, we have a little anaerobic metabolism in the EPOC. That's the difficulty in some of the figures. You say, well, it's just a 3-hour recovery for different time lengths, but we don't know what the exercise intensity is here. In order for us to get a complete picture of what this is, we would need to know what that walking speed would be for that, for this to say, well, maybe it was the walking speed is right below you know, that awkward phase when you're on a treadmill where you can walk a little bit, and then you have to kind of run a little bit, and then you walk a little bit. Is that it? That's going to require more energy than just somebody walking on it, okay? So we know all about this, correct? So in a short-term exercise, and we're talking about intense exercise here, our first 1 to 4 seconds are going to be through stored ATP stores, okay? And then if we go out to about 15 seconds, we're going to be in the PC system, and then everything over that is going to be as we shift to glycolysis, and then longer than 45 seconds to 2 minutes, you're going to start producing, you're going to tax the glycolysis system, and the aerobic system is going to have to take over, okay? And so here you have a breakdown of what's happening metabolism. These are very general, 70% anaerobic, 30% aerobic at 60 seconds. I don't know how those have to be general guidelines, and there's got to be a huge plus or minus on that based upon who you are, what you're doing, how fit you are, things like that. But generally, at 60 seconds, 70% anaerobic, 30% aerobic, and then as you extend farther out, 50% anaerobic, 50% aerobic at 2 minutes. When we showed this slide, when we were talking about metabolism, and this goes back to the comment was, you're never 100% anaerobic, and you're never going to be 100% aerobic. All of them are going to be working behind the scenes, but depending on what kind of activity you're doing, the intensity that you're doing, and the timing of it will dictate what's going on from a metabolic standpoint, okay? And these are still working, so if you look at this area right here, you're still having a little bit of ATP system. It's minimal, but it's there. You still have glycolysis that's doing work, and now aerobic metabolism is now predominantly supplying the energy for this type of activity, okay? And the good thing is we don't notice the difference. So when you guys were doing your VO2 max tests, did you notice when you switched over from glycolysis to aerobic metabolism? Did you see Lance shoot off the back of the treadmill because there was a stall between metabolism? No. They're running together in order to keep us efficient through that transition period, okay? Because it would suck if this dropped down to 0 and then aerobic metabolism had to come up, wouldn't it? You'd be like running along and then you'd just be like, That would be terrible, wouldn't it? We wouldn't be able to do any biathlon based upon that. We'd fall off our skis to do that. So there's a smooth transition to keep that energy supplying so that we're able to do that, okay? We don't notice a shifting between ATP, PC, glycolysis, and aerobic metabolism. So, and then we use these general terms of, well, it's 70% anaerobic and 30% aerobic in 60 seconds. Generally speaking, that's what you have. There's obviously going to be a lot of wiggle room within that 50-50 at 2 minutes, okay? Depends again on how fit you are, what the activity is, and the intensity of the exercise will dictate what the metabolism that's going on with it. So it's complicated with that. And so now you're trying to, let's use Austin as an example. So Austin has his clients that come in and go, guy comes in and goes, really want to do 2-minute activity because I want to burn 50% aerobic and 50% anaerobic. What are you going to do for me? And you're going, oh, let's pull it back a little bit and work through some things, right? But that's what people think. They come in with some mindset of, I know that at 60 seconds I'm burning 70% anaerobic and 30% aerobic. I'd like to keep right in that zone right there, 70 to 30. And you're like, first of all, you go, why? What's the goal of this? Things like that. So people will use these facts and numbers against you and think that they're experts in it. And if they're a fit-looking dude, this happens all the time, is if you have a really buff-looking dude that's lifting weights in the weight room, who are you going to go talk to about weightlifting? You, skinny guy over there in the corner, or the big buff guy with the big, huge guns? You're going to go, I've seen this in classes when I was an undergraduate, or not undergraduate, but as a master's student, I taught weight training classes. And I had this dude named Eli in my class. I don't know why, I think he did it because he got free gym time to come into class. But he'd taken it 100 times. He wasn't getting credit for it, he was just in there getting free gym time. Well, the dude's in there doing these isolated tricep exercise with like 200 pounds over his head. And pretty soon I look over and there's 3 other dudes over there doing isolated triceps exercise with the same weight Eli's doing. Like, what are you 3 clowns doing? Eli's doing it. And like, Eli has been doing it for 10 years and is trying to focus on this range of motion to get this buffness so that he can go to a weightlifting thing. And he goes, but it worked for him. Great job. So at some point you're going to be injured because you're training with weights that you can't lift to get this amount of a puff out in your tricep so that you can complete the weight training thing. So, but that's what they do, is they'll go to people that have results. And so that guy's the expert in the room. Also, the guy that's the buff dude over there in the weights, he's the expert in your gym. Is that correct? Do you have those guys? Yeah. Or the guy that's running really fast on the treadmill, he doesn't look like anything's happening to him. He's the expert. So people will migrate to him, and then he's going to give something like this. Oh yeah, you should do that, 70%, 30% aerobics. He doesn't have a clue what's going on. That's what you guys are going to have to fight in your fields, is you're going to have to fight science with the misnomer of what's going on, okay? Happens all the time. We get people all the time that want us to test things for them. Some guy out of the blue last week wanted us to test a cooling device for, I can't remember what it did. It was like running up and down the spine, and it was going to cool the spine selectively. And I was like, how are you going to cool the spine selectively by applying cold things over the back? And like, it may cool that area, but selectively cooling the spine, probably not going to happen. But he's trying to say that it's a great way for MS patients because you're actually cooling cerebral spinal fluid. That's awesome. You have no evidence to show that, but you want me to waste my valuable time doing that stuff. So again, here's the I think the slide that I showed you is 100% aerobic, 0% anaerobic. Weightlifting is that 100-meter dash. No, predominantly aerobic. Okay, go down to the bottom. Jogging is 100% aerobic. No questions asked. Okay? This slide says.
I like the ice hockey
It was ice hockey.
Where is it?
90% anaerobic.
90% anaerobic for ice hockey. Fencing, interesting. Fencing is pretty anaerobic as well. Don't know much about fencing. And is biathlon on there? Cross country skiing is, we got that on there, right? Okay, but it's not, cross country skiing is not 100% anaerobic, but jogging is. Cross country running, but jogging is 100% anaerobic. So obviously we could take this with a grain of salt. And does anybody see anyone that they totally disagree with on their scale here? 100 meters sprint, you don't think it's 100% anaerobic?
Or wait, no, soccer. That is way more aerobic.
Okay. Anna, do you agree with that? How often do you sprint in soccer? It's bouts, isn't it? It's like interval training. So what is your position on the field, Anna? Forward. So you don't even, I mean, when the ball goes back to defense, you're just back there cherry picking, aren't you? You're like, who's the, not, it's Ronaldo, the Brazilian, not Ronaldo, not Ronaldinho, the one before him. Wasn't his name Ronaldo? Dude was cherry picking. He was their leading scorer for Brazil for a long time. Ronaldo. This was before Ronaldo, this Portugal guy. But he never played defense. I mean, he would literally get back to where you need to get back to, and then just stand there, and then he would sprint. So he was probably more 80% because he never played defense. Never got it. Does your coach require you to play in defense? Yeah. They yell at you a little bit. Okay. So let's look at that. With that short-term exercise, let's look at what happens with long-term exercise. Okay, anything, let's say over 10 minutes. Primarily aerobic metabolism, and we can maintain it if it's a submaximal workload for a long time. Okay, people can maintain it for 5 hours. Okay, people run marathons. It takes them 5 hours. They can maintain a steady state workload as long as they can meet the demands for a long period of time. Athletes now are pushing themselves into these endurance races where they do 100 miles, that they can do exercise intensities for that long, okay? Things that will change that are obviously environment, okay? If you're in a hot and humid environment and your intensity is a little higher, you're gonna start to see your oxygen drift up over time because you have other physiological processes that are in play to try to counteract the heat and humidity, okay? Nothing that the body does comes for free. So if we start sweating, like Dr. Lukemeyer was talking about, that's going to require energy. The ATP binds to the sweat channels. There's channels there that are allowing us to sweat, and then also for us to retain sodium, that takes energy. So to do that, we're going to have to increase our oxygen uptake. So if you're in an environment, and you'll see this in the last lab of the semester, where we will be doing, you guys have to design your own study in the environmental chamber. So you may be looking at this and looking at that drift in oxygen over time, okay? If you design your study correctly. If you don't, then what's gonna happen, okay? So if we look at this high work rate, 75%, you wanna go back? Wait. Say when, don't let me go faster. Did you do the, your max test, was it hot and humid in the lab? No, probably not, so you probably didn't see anything that was hot, humid wise with that. Did you do the tests, so, Austin, did you do it on the bike? Or the treadmill?
Both.
Oh, you did both? Do you have 2 maxes on both? Interesting how much time between the 2 maxes.
Oh, the same day? No.
No, there's separate days?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, last week, what'd you do? Treadmills?
That's what it is.
This past week, treadmill.
Treadmill.
The week before
Was bikes? Any difference?
Mm-hmm.
Yours is higher on the treadmill or the bike?
We treadmill.
Okay. Is treadmill trained athletes?
No.
Training, running, and cycling.
Okay, so yours was high, maybe yours had some training, in fact, maybe you're just terrible at both, Lance, is that it? Training,
Yeah, I
cycling?
don't.
Okay. Interesting, okay. Good, Wendy?
Yes.
Okay. So, what we'd see, VO2 at a higher work rate, okay, if we're at 75 VO2 max, trying to maintain that, we're gonna have to increase our O2 to maintain that workload, okay? So it may drift up over time, hot, humid, everything that we just described previously, okay? So, this is what you guys did, metabolic responses to incremental exercise, okay? So, for the most part, oxygen uptake increases linearly until uptake is reached, VO2 max, okay? So what you should have seen was a figure that looks like this. Each time that you increased your workload, your O2 should have went up. Why? So we need to produce ATP aerobically, okay? In order to do that, we have to increase our O2 consumption to match the need for energy, correct? But at some point you got this, and Austin's apparently was over 2 to 3 minutes. Looked like this, apparently. Is that correct? Lance, did yours do that?
Oh, no.
No, you went up. Did you get a max? Or
Oh,
was
yeah.
yours peak? Oh yeah,
good question.
it was max. Did you see things that would tell you it was max? You didn't, because you weren't looking at the data. Who was your staff watching you?
Carmen and,
Did you see a max in Lance? Or did it just go up like this?
It's interesting, this is their assignment for this week.
Oh.
We determined this.
Sounds like we haven't determined it yet, have we?
Yeah, sounds like we're waiting until.
The last minute. Maybe we're hoping we get some answers here. Did we see that? Let's go to the staff of Austin. Austin, did we see a max in you? Really? Because you did last 2 to 3 minutes of plateauing, right?
Wasn't that long.
Wasn't that long? Okay. Okay.
5 seconds.
So that max is that ceiling. So based upon what we're hearing is, Lance, you are not going to be a marathon runner. Is that correct?
likely not.
Or let's you say you could. No, we're not going to say that. You can run a marathon. Or are you going to be a competitive marathon runner?
I don't know if I'll ever sign up for a marathon.
How about a competitive Tour de France cyclist?
Yeah, probably.
Probably. Wendy? No, he's not.
I have just as many Tour de France wins as Lance Armstrong. Okay.
So does everybody else in this room. And we also have the same amount of national championships Louisville does. We're talking about current events. We're all national champions. So VO2 max was that physiological ceiling. So why did Austin get 61 and Lance get 44, 45? Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Why the difference?
Cardiorespiratory system.
Better. Austin's just
More efficient.
Ah, there we go. Maybe, is it possible that Austin's trained aerobically? Austin, what do you do weekly for aerobic training?
I do run after I go through the gym about an hour and a half.
Okay, so how long do you train or run? Typically, average.
I try not to do more than
30 minutes a day?
No,
No. Like 2-3 times a week. At what speed would you say?
Probably about 5.5 minutes long.
5.5 minute mile? Lance, is that what you do?
Nope.
No. Okay. So maybe Austin was trained. Okay. Maybe Austin picked his parents better than Lance did. So it could be laid at the feet of his parents. So Lance probably went home after his max test and goes, thanks a lot, Mom. Thanks for nothing. So can Lance get his better? Yeah. Lance could go train aerobically, probably get that. Is he going to get to 61? We don't know. Maybe he could, yeah. Maybe he is an elite marathon runner. We just didn't know it. So,
Retired.
he retired. That's why he. So we don't know, but we can say comfortably we know that that's his max at that time point if we saw the factors that you should be looking at in the lab. Is that right, Carmen? Which you haven't given me an answer yet. Neither has your friend Hannah. Did you see a max in Lance?
Yeah, it's meant to stop, right?
Oh, is that the correct answer?
What if he broke his toe?
What if I knocked him off the treadmill?
Yeah.
He quit on the
Hmm. Is that a determinant of max?
Well, yeah, because you're supposed to go until you can't. Yeah. So,
What if it just looked like this? This is where you volitionally stopped. Is that max? Dusty's taking notes, Carmen, so be very careful in how you do this. Mental snapshot. So you don't know because he quit before he maybe got to max. So you would call this value what? Peak. Yeah. So did Lance get a VO2 max? The correct answer is, Davis, we'll go look at the data and we'll get back to you.
I'll look at the data and get back to you.
Good answer. Don't put yourself in a hole. Don't answer a question that you think you know, and then the guy knows behind you, knows that you didn't get it, because then I'll eat your lunch. That's how that goes when you design your own experiment in the environmental chamber. Be prepared to cry that day when you present your data. Okay? So factors that influence VO2 max, ability to deliver oxygen to the muscle. Okay? So there's a whole list of factors there that we'll talk about with regards to cardiorespiratory system. Okay? Once you get it there, the muscles have to use it. Okay? And can they produce ATP aerobically? Do they have enough mitochondria to do this job? A lot of things going on that are going to determine your maximal ability to use oxygen during exercise. Okay? We can talk about that probably for an entire class if we even wanted to look at this right here. This is what Dusty was looking at in his master's degree. Isn't that what, what's his name looks at? Did look at, was O2 delivery to muscle. So he did it with the animal model, didn't he, at Kansas State?
Yeah.
Yeah, horses. That would be awesome. We should get those for the lab, don't you think? You guys had your own horse, put it on the treadmill? That would be awesome. That would be awesome. I would be working with animals if we weren't killing them early. Okay? So if we cross this out, is that a max? No, that's a VO2 peak. In order for us to get max, we have to have that plateau and look at some other factors as well in there. Okay?